This video, I figured I'm going to help everybody get into RC racing as cheap as possible. Some ways to go about this so that you don't just spend all the money. This hobby can be very expensive, and if you're just trying to do it on the cheap, this is how you'd want to go about it. So first and foremost, do you have a basher? Is that basher able to race in a class at your local track? Find a track. If it's off-road that you're doing, great. On-road, find an on-road track. Indoor carpet, perhaps. Indoor carpet in the winter for off-road. Carpet indoor with jumps. Or outdoor dirt. 10 scale buggies and 8 scale buggies. And truggies. And nitro. So different tracks, different scene, different vibe. You'll learn that later. But for now, go down to the track on race night. Watch the people and ask the people questions. Go around and see what the biggest class is. Is it two-wheel drive buggy? Is it 4-mod buggy? See what the biggest class is. And the reason I say that is because the biggest class, you're always able to turn up with your buggy that you chose to get. And if it happens to be the biggest class is two-wheel buggy, and you choose a two-wheel drive buggy, then you're good to go. You're going to have a lot of resources around, and you're always going to have people to race with. Maybe ask what race nights there are, or maybe the track's affiliated with a hobby shop, which are the best kind, because you usually got parts there, and you can, get all the info right then and there. See the vibe, see what's going on race night. If they happen to have, and most do, a novice class. Now, novice class, you could be running, usually it's anything 10th scale, brushed or brushless, and usually like a 2S lipo, So if you already have a basher, you happen to have maybe a Slash, Traxxas Slash, or a Traxxas Bandit. And the reason I say those two is because you can kind of race them. Figure out what the biggest class is. Figure out what the most common vehicle that people are running. That's the next step. Why you want to do that is parts availability. Being able to ask questions. If you're having issues with your buggy, you're going to have resources around, like I said earlier, that you can say, hey, my transmission's making a funny noise. Have you ever had this happen? And you're just going to have answers right in front of you via the other racers. Now that you've got those notes all taken down and you know what the track's like, what are the race fees, get an idea of how much it's going to cost you to race if you want to do it a couple times or if you want to do it a whole season. Is there a membership? Is there discounts for having a membership, which often is the case? What are the practice days? Now, before you go down to a race night, just go down there and practice. Pay to practice a little bit. Rip around on the track, you'll be able to familiarize yourself with the area, with the facilities, how the track's laid out. There might be other racers there, and you can say, I'm nervous, I want to start racing. And usually people will open up because they know what it was like the first time. So they'll help you. Go down there on practice day, pay whatever fee it is, 10, 15, 20 bucks usually, and practice for however long they let you. That will give you an idea of, what your car feels like or your truck, what the facilities are like, and all that sort of stuff to kind of, take the edge off if you do decide to show up on race night. Now, if you don't have a basher, you don't have a vehicle, and you're thinking about how should you do this, now you've got a lot more research to do. But it is actually pretty simple. In the race world, there's a lot of choices, but there also isn't a lot of choices. There's kind of, a couple buggies from Associated, a couple buggies from Techno. It's the race companies that put a lot of R&D into racing development. And when you try one of these race specific buggies, you really, after a while, start to understand where they differ from a basher, and you know why they come to life on the track. So there's a couple different ways you can go about it. You can actually enter into the racing world by buying an RTR. There isn't a lot of RTR race buggies, but there are some out there. You could do RTR, but what I would actually suggest is look for something used. A lot of the times these associated buggies, up until the B7, a lot of the parts are very similar. So you could get something from, say, a 6.2 or a 6.3 or a 6.4, and a lot of the parts will be similar. So get yourself a used two-wheel drive buggy off somebody. You can get a roller, what's called a roller, and that's usually no motor, no speed control, no electronics. Usually, just the bare bones chassis, and then you would add your electronics, your tires and wheels. Now, you can get a kit fairly inexpensive, but I would suggest trying to find one used, especially a used associated. And Techno doesn't have a two-wheel drive. They have four-wheel drive. If there is a big class at your local track in four-wheel drive buggy, you cannot go wrong with a Techno EB 410.2. They are built like a tank. I've done some other videos on it. Strongly recommend getting one of these if you're going to run four-wheel drive. You cannot go wrong with an associated buggy. Tried, true, and tested. Super good. As long as your parts availability for everything that you choose needs to be available. You need to be able to get parts easily via online or your local hobby shop. So if there's a lot of guys at the track running associated, you'll be able to get a spare arm if you break it or something like that, or maybe the hobby shop's attached to the track and you can just go buy one up front, which is excellent. It's the best case scenario. Next thing, so you get your used buggy, probably sub $200, hopefully around $150. You find a nice guy at the track that wants, somebody to get into racing, and they'll often hook you up. That's what I do every time I've gotten out of RC and gone back in. I just go down to the track, I talk to people, I find myself a used buggy that is equivalent, current model, or nothing too old. Buy a used buggy from a reputable person. You can see people racing out there. If they're one of the top dudes and they're racing good and they, they've got all the right stuff, if they've got a used buggy, no problem, buying that off them if they've got a good reputation. So used buggy, absolutely. New buggy, can't go wrong with something as long as it has parts availability. I know I'm repeating myself sometimes, but I'm freestyling and I'm just going to kind of lay it out here. The key points here are, don't just buy everything. Go to the track and see what the people are using, because you're going to see that you could sort of ease into this. You don't need to just go splurge. I have watched people dive into this and spend all the money and get discouraged, and then just abort and sell everything and take a huge loss. I would prefer that everybody ease into it because we'll have more people in the hobby.